Christmas Day, and the air in the room was thick, not with holiday cheer, but with a heavy, quiet dread. Muhammad Ali lay in his bed, a ghost of the man he once was. His chest rose and fell with effort, each breath a small battle. His family sat around him, a silent circle, their eyes fixed on his frail form. The vibrant, booming voice that once captivated millions was gone, replaced by faint, struggling whispers. His body, once a marvel of speed and power, was now a prison. This was Parkinson's, his final, relentless opponent. It wasn't a man he could outmaneuver or knock out. It was a disease, a quiet, insidious force that had slowly, cruelly, chipped away at him for decades. It spoke through his shaking hands, his slurred words, his stiff movements. It mocked his past strength, a constant physical reminder of what it had taken from him. It was the ultimate antagonist, a shadow boxer that never tired, never gave up, and fought dirty every single round. We watched, knowing that even the greatest fighters face their toughest opponent within. The room was carefully decorated. A small twinkling Christmas tree stood in the corner, its lights reflecting in the tearful eyes of his loved ones. Presents lay unwrapped, forgotten. No one cared about gifts. All that mattered was the man in the bed. His wife, Lonnie, held his hand, her gaze unwavering, a silent promise of strength. His children, grown now, stood close, some holding back sobs, others just staring, trying to memorize every last detail of their father. The illness had stolen so much. His quick feet, his lightning-fast jabs, his famous shuffle. But more than anything, it had stolen his voice. The voice that had declared him the greatest. The voice that had challenged nations. The voice that had recited poetry and rallied crowds. It was the instrument of his charisma, his power, his very being. Now, it was just a faint, raspy sound, barely audible. This silent room, this struggling breath, this fading giant, it was all a profound, painful testament to the price of a life lived so fully, so fiercely. He had fought champions, racists, governments, and expectations. He had won and lost, but always with an unyielding spirit. Yet this last fight was different. There were no ropes to lean on, no bell to signal the end of a round. Only the slow, steady advance of the disease and the quiet, desperate hope of his family. His eyes, still sharp despite everything, scanned the faces around him. A flicker of recognition, a hint of the old spark. He tried to speak again, a soft, guttural sound escaping his lips. Everyone leaned in, straining to hear. Was it a word? A prayer? A final message? The mystery hung heavy in the air, a silent question mark over the greatest legend of our time. Before we continue with the incredible story of his life, his battles, and his final heartbreaking words, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and please, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. We want to hear from you. To understand the man struggling in that bed, you have to go back, way back, to Louisville, Kentucky. Picture it, the 1940s and 50s. This wasn't the integrated America we know today. This was the segregated South, a place where the color of your skin dictated where you could eat, where you could live, and what opportunities were open to you. For a young black boy named Cassius Clay, this was his world. Louisville wasn't just a place of hardship, though. It was also a city with a vibrant black community. There were bustling churches, close-knit neighborhoods, and families who leaned on each other. The rhythm of life was different then. Sundays were for church and family dinners. Weekdays were for school, and then for work for many. Cassius grew up surrounded by strong women and hard-working men, all navigating a system designed to hold them back. His mother, Odessa, was a homemaker, a steady presence. His father, Cassius Sr., painted signs and murals, a creative spirit in a world that often stifled artistry and ambition in black individuals. His early life was marked by these contradictions. He was loved and supported within his family, but stepped outside, and the harsh realities of racial injustice hit hard. He remembered being denied water at a store, being told to go to the back door of a restaurant, seeing signs that read, "Whites Only." These weren't isolated incidents. They were daily routines, constant reminders of his place in society. It was a subtle, grinding kind of oppression, not always violent, but always present, always limiting. These experiences weren't just background noise. They were the raw fuel for his later fire. They fostered a deep-seated resilience, a refusal to accept the status quo. He saw the unfairness, the indignity, and it sparked something inside him. It wasn't just about being good at something. It was about being so good that they couldn't ignore him. It was about proving them wrong, about fighting for dignity. Even as a young boy, there were hints of the defiance that would later define him. He wasn't one to quietly accept injustice. He had a natural swagger, a quick wit, and a confidence that rubbed some people the wrong way, especially those who expected black children to be seen and not heard. This early environment, full of both love and systemic prejudice, shaped his worldview. It instilled in him a powerful desire for justice, a need to speak out, and an unshakable belief in his own worth, even when the world around him tried to diminish it. These societal antagonists, racism, poverty, and the limitations they imposed, were subtle in his early years, but they were ever present. They were the forces he would later confront head-on, not just in the boxing ring, but in the arena of public opinion and civil rights. His path was being laid, brick by brick, by the very world he was growing up in. The initial, subtle signs of his internal tension, his dissatisfaction with things as they were, had already begun to emerge, long before he ever laced up a pair of professional boxing gloves. He was already fighting, in his own way, even before he knew what he was truly fighting for. Even as Cassius Clay's boxing skills started to get noticed, the cracks in the system he lived in became clearer. He was a rising star, winning amateur titles, but the racial slights didn't disappear just because he was good with his fists. They just changed form. He might be celebrated in the ring, but outside of it, he was still just another black man in a segregated America. There were so many small, everyday humiliations that piled up. He once went to a restaurant in his hometown, proud of an Olympic medal he'd just won. He was a hero, an American champion. But when he tried to order a hamburger, they wouldn't serve him. "We don't serve Negroes," they told him. He was a gold medalist, a symbol of American pride, yet he couldn't eat in a public diner. It was a punch to the gut, a constant reminder that his achievements, his fame, didn't erase the color of his skin in the eyes of many. He remembered throwing that medal into the Ohio River in frustration. Whether that story is fully true or partly myth, the feeling behind it was very real. It showed how deeply those slights cut. The boxing establishment itself, the very system that profited from his talent, often felt like it was breaking promises. They wanted him to be a certain kind of champion, one who was charismatic but not too outspoken, powerful but not too political. They wanted his athleticism, but not necessarily his mind or his voice when it strayed from what they considered acceptable. There was a constant, subtle pressure to conform, to play the role they had laid out for him. He was supposed to be a good athlete, a good showman, but not a social commentator. This created a friction, a growing tension between the man he was becoming and the role society and the boxing world expected him to fill. It was an abusive kind of neglect from the system. They would celebrate his victories, but ignore the racism he faced outside the ring. They would promote his fights but criticize his growing assertiveness. When he started to speak out about his faith, about civil rights, about the injustices he saw, the support from some corners of the establishment started to waver. They preferred a silent, compliant champion. They wanted to control his image, his message, and his life. This wasn't always overt abuse. It was often a subtle pressure, a cold shoulder, a quiet threat to his career if he didn't fall in line. They wanted him to be a product, not a person with deeply held beliefs. The cumulative emotional wear of all this was immense. It wasn't just one big event that made him decide to defy the draft or change his name. It was years of these small cuts, these broken promises, this systemic pressure to be someone he wasn't. He saw the hypocrisy, the double standards. He saw how society celebrated him when he won, but discarded him when he spoke his truth. This constant friction, this feeling of being used and then dismissed, built up inside him. It fueled his later defiance, making it not just a political stance, but a deeply personal one. He wasn't just fighting opponents in the ring. He was fighting a system that tried to box him in, literally and figuratively. His struggles were not isolated incidents. They were the culmination of years of emotional and systemic friction, pushing him towards a breaking point where he would have to make choices that would define not just his career, but his entire legacy. The conflict inside Ali and around him reached a boiling point with the Vietnam War. This wasn't just another fight. It was a battle for his conscience, and it would put him against the very country he represented. When he received his draft notice, the world watched. The government expected him to serve, to be a patriotic symbol. But Ali, now a devout Muslim, had different ideas. He declared himself a conscientious objector, stating that his faith forbade him from participating in a war he saw as unjust. "I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong," he famously said. This simple statement ignited a firestorm. The public outcry was immediate and fierce. Newspapers screamed headlines of betrayal. Talk show hosts debated his patriotism. Politicians condemned his stance. There was a media frenzy, with every word he uttered scrutinized, twisted, and often demonized. People who had cheered his knockouts now called him a coward, a traitor. The political pressure was immense, a heavy blanket trying to smother his voice. He faced legal battles too, with the threat of imprisonment looming large over his head. Losing his freedom was a real possibility, right when he was at the peak of his athletic powers. The discussions around his refusal were raw and emotional. People took sides, fiercely. Some saw him as a hero, standing up for his beliefs against a powerful government. Others viewed him as a selfish draft dodger, disrespecting the soldiers who were fighting and dying overseas. He was forced into moral dilemmas that most people never have to face. Should he sacrifice his principles for his career, for his freedom? Or should he stand firm, knowing it could cost him everything? He found himself isolated from many former supporters, even some in the boxing world who had once championed him. They couldn't understand or wouldn't accept his decision. This period put an incredible strain on his family. His decision wasn't just his own. It affected everyone around him. There were silent judgments from some, whispers of disapproval. But he also had unwavering support from others who understood the depth of his conviction. His wife, his parents, his closest friends. They bore the brunt of the public's anger alongside him. It was a time of immense pressure, where every choice he made had far-reaching consequences, not just for himself, but for his loved ones. As the narrator of this story, watching Ali during this time felt like seeing a man pushed to his absolute limit. He faced losing everything: his heavyweight title, his ability to earn a living, his very freedom. The emotional and psychological toll must have been unbearable. He was Muhammad Ali, the greatest. But even he felt the immense weight of the world pressing down on him. He wasn't just fighting opponents in the ring. He was fighting an entire system, a prevailing public opinion that wanted to crush him. The atmosphere of the late 1960s United States only amplified this struggle. It was a time of intense social upheaval. The sounds of protests filled the streets, demanding civil rights, an end to the war. The country was divided, and Ali, by taking his stand, placed himself right in the middle of that division. The air was thick with tension, with hope and despair, with anger and defiance. This charged environment reinforced the immense psychological burden he carried. He was not just a boxer, he had become a symbol, a lightning rod for the era's biggest controversies. His stand was not just about him. It was about the soul of a nation at war with itself. Then came the moment of no return. On April 28, 1967, Muhammad Ali walked into the induction center in Houston, Texas. He stood there, tall and unyielding. When his name, Cassius Marcellus Clay, was called, he refused to step forward. 3 times they called his name. 3 times he remained rooted to his spot, a silent, powerful defiance against the military draft. This was not a moment of hesitation. It was a decisive action, a conscious choice to prioritize his conscience over his career, his freedom, and everything he had built. His refusal was a profound break from the expected path. For any other athlete, especially one at the pinnacle of his sport, such a decision would be unthinkable. But Ali was not just any athlete. He was a man driven by deep personal and religious convictions. He knew the cost, had weighed it, and was prepared to pay it. This act irrevocably altered his life and career, setting him on a course that would redefine his legacy far beyond the boxing ring. He chose to be a conscientious objector, stating, "War is against the teachings of the Holy Quran. I'm not trying to dodge the draft. We are not supposed to take part in wars unless declared by Allah or the Messenger. We don't take part in Christian wars or wars of any unbelievers." The response from the establishment was swift and brutal. This represented the antagonist's most extreme blow, an attempt to silence and punish him for daring to defy. Within hours of his refusal, the New York State Athletic Commission suspended his boxing license and stripped him of his heavyweight title, effectively banning him from the sport he dominated. Other boxing commissions quickly followed suit. The government, through the legal system, moved to prosecute him. He was indicted, tried, and found guilty of draft evasion, facing a 5-year prison sentence and a $10,000 fine. It was a clear message: conform or be crushed. But this extreme act by society, intended to break him, instead forged him into something stronger. It was a moment where a hidden truth was revealed, not just to the public, but perhaps even more deeply to Ali himself. He was more than just a boxer. He was an icon of resistance, civil rights, and religious freedom. His conviction, his unwavering principles, were laid bare for the world to see. He had made a choice, and he stood by it even when everything was taken from him. This was Ali breaking the pattern. He refused to be confined by the role of a mere athlete, celebrated for his physical prowess, but silent on social issues. He transformed into a global symbol, a figure whose actions resonated far beyond the ropes of a boxing ring. His decision was impactful, realistic, and profoundly emotionally coherent. It showed an unyielding conviction that few possess, especially when faced with such dire consequences. He lost his prime fighting years, years where he could have earned millions and solidified his already legendary status. Yet, he never wavered. He spent those years speaking to college campuses, engaging in debates and advocating for his beliefs, becoming a powerful voice for peace and justice. He used his platform, even without his boxing gloves, to fight for what he believed was right. This period, though devastating for his career, cemented his place in history as a man of principle, a true champion outside of sport. The aftermath of Ali's stand was brutal, a period of forced exile from the sport he loved. For 3.5 years, he was barred from fighting, his championship belt stripped, his career put on hold. These were his prime years, the years when a fighter truly peaks. Yet, he refused to break. He traveled the country, speaking at colleges and universities, his voice now a weapon not of physical intimidation, but of intellectual and moral conviction. He debated, he inspired, he challenged. He became a symbol for the anti-war movement and the civil rights struggle, his words carrying more weight than any punch he had ever thrown. During this time, the world watched. Some condemned him, calling him unpatriotic, a draft dodger. Others revered him as a hero, a man who stood for something bigger than himself. His managers, his trainers, even some opponents, had to choose sides. Many stood by him, recognizing the depth of his conviction. Others distanced themselves, fearing the backlash. But through it all, Ali maintained his faith, his humor, and his unwavering belief in the righteousness of his cause. Then, in 1971, the Supreme Court overturned his conviction, a unanimous decision that vindicated his stand. The legal battle was over, and Ali was free to fight again. His return to the ring was nothing short of epic. He was no longer just a boxer. He was a legend, carrying the hopes and dreams of millions. He reclaimed his title in a series of unforgettable fights, battles that transcended sport and became cultural touchstones. The Rumble in the Jungle against George Foreman, the Thrilla in Manila against Joe Frazier. These were not just boxing matches, but narratives of human endurance, courage, and spirit. He fought with a fire that seemed to burn brighter after his forced absence, proving that even after years away, his spirit was unbroken. But the years of fighting, the thousands of punches absorbed, began to take their toll. The cruel irony of Parkinson's disease, the ultimate antagonist, slowly crept in. It was a silent, insidious enemy, striking down the man who once moved like a butterfly and stung like a bee. The disease began to steal his agility, then his coordination, and eventually his iconic voice. The man whose words once captivated millions, whose boasts were as legendary as his jabs, found his speech slurred, his movements slow and deliberate. This was the full revelation of the consequence hinted at the very beginning. The loss of his physical prowess, the fading of his powerful voice, was a stark contrast to the moral and social victories he had won. Society, the antagonist of his early years, had been forced to reckon with its injustices. But Parkinson's was a different kind of foe, one that could not be outwitted or outpunched. It was a physical deterioration, a relentless, ongoing struggle that tested his spirit in a new, profound way. Despite the physical decline, Ali's spirit remained indomitable. He continued to be a global advocate for peace and understanding, his presence alone a powerful message. He became a symbol of resilience in the face of adversity, showing the world that true strength comes not just from the body, but from the soul. His unwavering faith, his kindness, and his continued advocacy represented an emotional victory over the disease that was slowly claiming his body. On that Christmas day, surrounded by his family, Muhammad Ali whispered his final words to God. They were not words of anger or regret, but of surrender and peace. It was a moment of profound spiritual connection, a testament to a life lived on his own terms, ultimately finding solace and connection beyond fame and physical prowess. His journey had been a complex tapestry of triumph and struggle, defiance and faith. He was more than a boxer. He was a cultural icon, a symbol of resistance, an embodiment of faith, and a testament to the enduring human spirit. His legacy lives on, a quiet, thoughtful echo in the hearts of those who remember the man who dared to be different, and who fought not just in the ring, but for the soul of humanity itself.